Welcome to the Love the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas, joined as always by former NFL scout Brian Broaddus, the Super Bowl winner. He is now the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network, and he is ours right here for the next 40 minutes or so. Brian Broaddus, how are you?
I'm doing well, Robert. Thank you very much, man. Nice to have a weekend of not sweating a game for your Dallas Cowboys. Didn't have to sweat an LSU game, so actually a really good football weekend for me. But didn't do me any good to watch the Detroit Lions play last night, knowing that's going to be an opponent in the next couple of weeks. So a lot going on in the football world, a lot going on for the Dallas Cowboys as they get ready here for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, it was nice to kind of change things up and actually sit and consume football without having to, worry about Cowboys game coming up or anything else. But let's talk about that Cowboy game. I know the last time that we had a chance to talk would have been right after. It was just the immediate post-game thoughts from the Giants game. We've got injuries to dive into, a new defensive end, some different things. But let's just talk about when you went back and watched the game against the Giants, was there anything that you took away from it and said, man, I feel differently about this than I did in the immediate aftermath, or, I thought this was better, or this was worse, or this was more concerning? What were some of your big takeaways when you saw the film back?
Yeah, that's, boy, it seemed like ages ago, but here we go. Yeah, that's what Thursday football will do for you. The thing that I was really happy for Mazi Smith in a way of how critical we all seem to be of him in the media. And you hear the word busts and, a lot of people throwing things out, throwing a lot of dirt on Mazi Smith. Really happy for him for at least 1 week, for him to play the way that he did. I think he's capable of carrying this thing over. I think John Michael Schmitz, the center for the Giants, is not a bad center, pretty athletic center. But that was like some old school Big Ten crime there with the Michigan man beating up on the Minnesota man a little bit.
Yeah.
And, but good for Mazi Smith. Hopefully he could continue to play at a high level. How could you not, think about what happened injury-wise, with Parsons and then with Tank. There are things with the offense. It still looks like to me that I've never seen, I shouldn't say never. I use this statement as this offense. It seems like, or appears that everybody else you watch in the league finds ways to move the ball, and they look pretty smooth doing it, and it looks pretty, Dallas seems like they're always fighting for every yard they get. Nothing comes easy for them with the way they play. And, we could talk about scheme, we could talk about players, we could talk about a lot of things, but it doesn't look as, it's not even the word clean, because you got a rookie left tackle, and it's not going to be pretty with him. You got a rookie center, and there's going to be problems. There's going to be problems with the right tackle. There'll be problems with the right guard. You don't really, the running backs. You don't create a lot of space. But here we are. It just seems like every yard is a struggle, and I don't know, and I'm waiting for that to change, and maybe it won't change after looking at that. I also felt like defensively, though, Bob, that if the Giants completed some deep balls, you probably would have lost that football game.
Oh, yeah.
And, unfortunately, you were down to your, fifth, sixth corner, and it's tough. But Diggs on the other side, and fortunately he made the play that helped you get off the field there on that fourth down, but then you missed the field goal. That was a problem. The field goal kicker's been great, don't get me wrong, but man, you just got so used to him knocking those things home. But yeah, it's, the Giants, they couldn't run the ball worth a damn. Good for Dallas. And they couldn't connect on deep passes. Again, good for Dallas. Or that game might have gone another direction.
When we talk about the Cowboys offense, and this is a broader topic for moving forward, and hopefully something they're spending the next 10 days on, I don't know what's happened to the deep passing game. I don't know if it's just a lack of trust in being able to protect with young guys, or what are some of the things they're trying to do with some of their route concepts that are different. But Brian, he didn't attempt a pass to Dak Prescott over 20 yards in this game. The first time that's happened since October of 2018. So that was the pre-Amari Cooper trade, when everybody was just like, what in the world is going on with these receivers in this offense? So a little bit of an oddity in that sense. But when we look at the passing game and what they're doing, Brandon Cooks is supposed to be the vertical guy. And I don't know if, and they haven't always used him that way. They've used him at times for a lot of comebacks and slants and different things. But I don't know if he's hurt, or he's declining, or what's going on. But Brandon Cooks, those Giants DBs to me did not look like they were threatened by the speed the same way defensive backs have typically been. One of the big advantages Cooks has always had is ability to threaten with the speed, attack it really aggressively, be able to stop on a dime, come back, attack the football, and then have space. And it looks like it's taken him longer to get that, like that stop-start ability doesn't look as strong as it has in years past. It doesn't look like teams are threatened the same way by the vertical speed. What are you seeing in the vertical passing game right now, or the lack of it? And is there anything that's giving you pause about Cooks like I've got right now?
I reached out to folks because I knew you were concerned about Cooks. I reached out to see if he is banged up or there's something that we're missing here. I think, and I don't want to use the tackle and the center or the line as an excuse, but you've opened up a different line of thinking where Mike McCarthy might not be completely confident to throw the ball down the field, or the quarterback might not be totally confident to throw the ball down the field with this offensive line. Now, if you don't have confidence in the tackle, here's the flip side of that. Why do you have him almost 90% of the time one-on-one over there?
Yep.
So there's something clearly not right. I would have used the excuse of, well, the offensive line, rookie tackle, rookie center, offensive right tackle at times doesn't always get his blocks. The right guard, plays at a nice level, but no longer the player that he once was. There's some excuses you can use with the offensive line, but they surely don't do anything to help Guyton over there. At least they didn't in that game against the Giants. And usually the teams that are, you look at the Saints, the deep ball that they hit, the touchdown over the top between your two safeties. Usually the Cowboys' way of getting the ball down the field is run max protection. And they usually keep a couple tight ends in, and they'll make sure that thing's blocked up, and they'll give Dak the opportunity to throw the ball. Haven't seen that very much. Haven't seen that. So game plan, maybe they didn't feel like that they could throw the ball down the field against the Giants. I'll be interested when after our show, I get started on the Steelers, and get the later in the week when we break them down, we'll have a little bit better understanding of what they might be. But they just don't, if Cooks is banged up, he sure isn't leading on like he's banged up. And maybe somebody will admit to us that he is.
Was it the Baltimore game? Heading into the Baltimore game, he popped up with that knee issue in the middle of the week out of nowhere.
And damn, Bobby, I can't tell you what I had for lunch.
I think that was Baltimore. That was the Baltimore game. And if it was, then that's also short week. Maybe it was a little tougher on than they thought. But I thought it was interesting because I asked Jerry on Tuesday on 105 through the Fan on Sean and RJ. I asked him about Cooks, and I said, his confidence level in the receivers behind Lamb, and he answered. He said, "We've got depth there," but then he said, "We'll see if he's out there, or we'll see if he's able to go this Sunday."
Yeah,
and I just went, "Okay, did he think I was talking about Dalvin Cook because we just finished Dalvin Cook questions?" And that happens.
You get confusion. Yeah.
And so that can happen. He hears Cook, hears a bunch of questions about Dalvin Cook, and then one about Cooks. I could see it maybe being something that he caught off guard, but it made me go, okay, either he missed something about Dalvin Cook, or we're going to see that injury report on Wednesday, which this is dropping Wednesday morning. we're going to see that injury report on Wednesday, and Brandon Cooks might be on it, which would at least honestly make me feel a little better, Brian. It'd make me feel a little better about what I'm seeing from Brandon Cooks, because like I said, against the Giants, he wasn't getting any separation against a secondary that was pretty banged up.
Yeah, but you know what? This is where I'll defend Brandon Cooks a little bit, because there has been time where if in fact he is banged up and is playing about 75 or 80%, there have been times where Brandon Cooks has been healthy and they haven't got him the ball, that it's been a problem getting him the ball. We call for creativity, we call for motion, we call for all these things. Mike McCarthy gets asked questions. Jerry Jones gets asked questions about this. Creative play in the game. Cooks runs route behind Ferguson clearing through. All of a sudden now it's secondary having to deal with tight end running vertically and then receiver behind with a two-way go with ability to cut in or out. And then they find a way to get him the ball. Where is that? Why is that a one-time thing? Why isn't that not an every-time thing? Why is that not, and it doesn't have to be Ferguson. It could be Schoonmaker. It could be, now that they play span forward all the time.
Yeah.
Poor John Stevens, and you ask the folks, oh no, he's healthy. He's ready to go. I'd sure like to see John Stevens play. And I try and watch Spanford. Hell, I try and watch Schoonmaker. Hell, I try and watch all these guys, but it just seems very strange right now that they can't get John Stevens on this field. But I'm just saying from a tight end combination routes with the wide receivers, yes, give me more of that. Give me more of guys, playing off each other, in routes. And guys, like I said earlier, Bobby, every other team and not every team in the NFL moves the football, but the ones that are really good at it, they're fun to watch. They are fun to watch because you see them create space for their guys. This quarterback, I shouldn't say nobody because I need to do research before I say this, but I'll say it. I would guarantee you that near the bottom of guys that have to make, guys that have to make tight window throws in this game, I guarantee you Dak Prescott's top 3 when it comes to guys that have to consistently make tight windows throws in their offense.
I've got this number for you, Brian. Dak is first in tight window passing rate in the NFL.
Yeah.
And his receivers are tied for last in average target separation.
Okay, thank you for being on the spot. I appreciate you doing that. First in tight window throws, last in separation. Who is that on?
Yeah.
Is that on? And listen, I'm going to say there's not there are guys on this receiving core that can run a little bit. Are they Hill and others? No, they're not. But okay, if you have a receiving core that struggles with separation, why would you not try and create separation for them?
Yeah. In fact, let's keep this going really quickly. I got to remind everybody, you are listening to the Love the Star podcast. Love the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, carrying over the thought here about separation and creating things for it. I know you've really evolved or kind of expanded your thought on analytics in recent years. Like you've really embraced more of that kind of stuff, and I know that it's something that you like using as part of it. Where have you come down in terms of both before, maybe a decade ago versus now, about the idea of motion at the snap? Because that's one that is a big number that people like to point to. And I saw the numbers today from Seth Walder. The Cowboys this season are 30th, just ahead of the Jaguars and the Patriots, 2 teams you don't want to be right next to, just in front or just behind the Browns and Panthers. They are 30th in snap motion. So what are in general your thoughts on snap motion and maybe why the arguments for static look. Like a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, he's near the bottom of the league as well because he wants some of that static look for the air raid concepts.
Yeah. Okay, couple things here, Bob. We get on McCarthy for the lack of motion. I'm going to ask you this question. And I don't mean this in any mean-spirited way. Do you have when you run motion, do you have the receiving core and the quarterback that can handle a lot of motion? Or do you, when I talk about from a concept of, do you have problems when you run motion? Do the guys pick up, or the guys, the word you're going to hear is, are they smart enough? And I mean this in no disrespect.
I get what you mean.
Are we, can you call it football intelligence? I don't know. I'm looking for a word because these guys aren't dumb. These guys are dumb. Yeah. But okay. And Mike always talks about motion with a purpose. He always talks about that.
Yeah.
But I wonder if Mike McCarthy is defending his players in a way of not using motion because they're not picking up the concepts of what they have to do in the motion.
Yeah, it could be totally. And
I'm just throwing it out as a possibility because I haven't heard anything. I don't want to offend anybody, and I'm not trying to. And please, if you're going to clip this and play it to players or whatever, and me say Brian's calling everybody dumb, that's not the truth. I am looking for reasons why this guy does not use motion. And you mentioned it, Cliff Kingsbury. He plays kind of a static game. You look at the great Peyton Manning. Reggie Wayne played on one side. Marvin Harrison always played on the right side. Never moved. Never moved. Always played on the right side. So, you wonder, do you have the personnel? And Mike always talks about with a purpose. I would love to see them play like the Dolphins do, with motion and then motion at the snap. San Francisco, motion at the snap. Rams, motion at the snap. I want to see that. I'd love to. But you also maybe Mike McCarthy might be protecting his players that when they run motion, they have more problems. They're one of the most penalized teams in the league. Think about that. You're running motion. It takes time. Are you worried about that? Are you worried about false starts? You worried pre-snap penalties? I don't know. I'm like the old Bob Seger song. I'm working on mysteries without any clues. Night moves. That's what I'm doing right now, and I'm trying to figure it out. Because nobody. I asked. This is a question, Bobby. I asked my guys today. And I'm going to ask you this question because you could name it because you do get to interview Jerry Jones. So I'll flip it and say this. You get a chance to, and you do interview Mike McCarthy too. So here we go. If you can ask Mike McCarthy a question, what question would it be? Because he has to answer the question straight and give you an honest, in-depth answer. What would that question be?
Ooh, so
he has to be honest. You get the truth. You don't get some, well, we're trying this and doing that, and we don't get to run it enough because of this and that. You on a Friday you get Mike on a Friday. You on a Friday morning, bright and early, get Mike McCarthy, and you get to ask him a question that he honestly has to answer truthfully. What question are you asking him?
Do you and your two star players on offense, CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, are you guys actually aligned in the vision of the offense?
Fair.
Because I think his answer, if he had a truth serum, would be no.
Yeah.
I don't think the quarterback and the receiver are in lockstep with your head coach about and your play caller. I don't think they're in lockstep on what this offense should look like. I think they're real, genuine, not necessarily tense. I think there has been tension before, but I think that as it stands now, I think there's real, genuine, just fundamental philosophical football disagreements on what it should look like.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of plays out the way that it does.
I think it was funny when Dak Prescott after the Saints game was talking about their offense, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Remember that? He was talking about open looks and stuff like that, running lanes, all those things.
Looks a little different from the last half of last year, doesn't it?
You would ask Mike, and his answer would be, if you had to guess what. And again, I'm asking to jump in the mind of Mike McCarthy, and that's not fair to Mike McCarthy. But you feel okay if you asked. What if you asked Dak that? Then if you asked Dak that question, he would say
no,
probably not.
Yeah, I think.
But see, I wonder if Mike is trying to protect his guys though, because he's worried about. He's already one of the most penalized teams. Maybe he's worried about.
I think
more
Mike's
problems pre-snap.
Look, Mike is definitely somebody who protects his players.
There's no question about
Mike
that.
protected the hell out of Zach Martin in 2020 when Zach Martin flat out did not want to play offensive tackle when they needed him to. And instead, Mike went up there as somebody who believes in best five. Mike went up there and said, that's fantasy football nonsense.
He did say that
as a means to just protect his veteran player. As just saying, nope, I'll take it. I mean, that's the reality. Zach Martin didn't want to play tackle. He did it in a pinch. He does not want to do it regularly. That's just the case. So he absolutely protects his players. I will say that I think there are times players on offense maybe feel like they're protecting Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
And feel like, all right, you know what? We'll let's just kind of grit our teeth on this one, but we don't always necessarily agree with what's happening here.
Yeah.
And I think that's not unusual. It's not like totally unusual to just think. You got to remember, there's 53 players out here, 15 to 25 coaches, depending on what kind of a staff you have. They're not going to all be. You're not going to find 80 people with all the different philosophies that exist about football and everything else. You're not going to find 80 people on the same page. That's part of why team building is difficult. That's part of why culture is important, is because you're going to have disagreements and you're going to need people to follow a vision, a unified vision where maybe people aren't getting everything they want. But I will say, if there's one area where you most want to see that aligned, it would probably be between play caller and quarterback. Like that's where you would like to see most of it. And I just don't know that it always is.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's, if the pre-snap motion, how about this? Chris Arnold, I asked Chris Arnold that question, I work with in 105.3 The Fan. And I asked Chris just to, off the, he was on air, or we were getting ready to go back on air, and he said this. He said,
I knew, I'll tell you what, I knew Ralph Tresvant when he was in New Edition. And we used to talk about football all the time. Me and him and Teddy Pettigrew.
That's Chris. If people don't know Chris is a wonderful human being.
He is the Forrest Gump of radio.
Hall of Fame radio career.
Everywhere. He has been everywhere throughout history.
Everywhere throughout history. Chris Arnold wanted to ask Jerry Jones, would he fire Stephen Jones?
Ooh.
Would he ever consider firing Stephen Jones?
Like family relationship aside?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Chris, I said you could either ask Jerry or Mike a question, and he goes, I'll ask Jerry a question, and he goes, would you ever consider firing Stephen? I thought that was a really interesting question. If you had to get the truthful answer, that's tough, man.
That's a strong question. I like it a lot. All right, let's quickly before we get to the
I'm sorry about that. Yeah,
no, that was good. That was the direction we ended up taking things here. But before we get to the mailbag here, wanted to ask you a couple different questions, Brian.
Yeah.
First off, here the Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence injuries.
Yeah.
There was some discussion about how are the Cowboys going to play this? Are they going to go out and make a trade signing? Are they going to poach somebody off a practice squad? They end up poaching KJ Henry, the defensive end out of Clemson from last year. I think it was when he was coming out.
5th round pick by the Commanders. Yeah.
Yeah. And a guy who, good athlete. I remember thinking, I'd take a 5th, 6th round flyer on that guy. So a year later to be able to poach him after he's had some NFL experience, I think probably got lost in the shuffle a little bit on the new Dan Quinn staff in Washington. So he ended up being a casualty there.
He played for your current defensive line coach here in Dallas.
It's a benefit too, there. And so you picked that up. Your thoughts on KJ Henry, and are we just looking at the Carl Lawson, Marshawn Nealon, Chauncey Golston rotation?
Yeah, I think to me there's and if people follow me, they understand I have what's called the Gang of 7. which is my general manager, pro personnel guys and gals that I talk to around the league that are really, really plugged into what's going on. They're watching tape every day. They're keeping their emergency boards. They're doing everything, for the teams. And I asked them, and I said, I just solicited their opinion. I said, could you guys give me 3 players off a practice squad that would be guys I need to watch? And Henry was one of them. Yannick Ngakoue was another one. And then Chason from, the Raiders was the third one.
Chason, yeah.
Kayvon Chason, who was, you remember the CeeDee Lamb draft, that's who everybody thought Dallas was going to take at defensive end. Well, he's on the Vegas Raiders practice squad. So took a peek at all 3, but the one to a personnel person, the guy and gals, they said the one that they would like is Henry. That would be the one that they would go poach. And so sure enough, I'm like, okay, do the work, talk about it yesterday on Krusty's Corner that, hey, these are what my gang of 7 guys are saying. Then today we get through the day, the middle of the day, and, we learn about Henry being here, and so, good to go. Good for him. Watching the tape, got really good length, plays off blocks well. He's one of these guys that, in the running game could be really solid. He's a guy that, like I say, the length helps him control blockers. He can get rid of blockers. He could chase from the backside. He's got a really good first step. He can get to the corner, but he has some trouble really turning the corner. He doesn't get, when he gets to the corner, it's a little bit of a struggle for him to bend and to get the corner. Now, they're looking at depth pieces here. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to find somebody that is better than maybe Sweat, when you start looking at edge players. And I mentioned that, that Jeff Zagina, the defensive line coach, had him in the Commanders last year. So he knows the player. Was probably involved in the draft process of selecting him in the 5th round. Yeah. So, makes a lot of sense from that regard. They tend to lean on their coaches a little bit. They're pro personnel guys. I think Alex Loomis and those guys, Henry Schroka, do a really nice job over there. I like the job they do. But, they're going to talk to the coaches and, here we go. You're going to poach a guy that's in shape, ready to go. You don't have time for ramp-up period. Now, the way this is going to play out, from what I understand, injury-wise, you're likely going to not have Micah these next 2 games.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, probably San Francisco's when he's back.
San Francisco would be the time when I think he would be back. But Tank on the other end, this thing's looking like maybe 6 games. This injury he has is not good for him.
And historically, it's been very rough for the Cowboys whenever DeMarcus Lawrence is off the field. The numbers off the field, whether it be due to an injury or just the snaps he's off the field, they are not nearly as efficient.
So this is Golston. This is Golston. This is Sweat. This is Nealon. This is now, Henry. They're going to get opportunities. They're going to get opportunities to play.
You are listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love the Star mailbag. Time to get into the thoughts, comments, and questions of our dear, sweet listeners. First one here from Cowboy Chuck. Why do the Cowboys feel interior defensive line is not a draftable position? Have the scouts been told not to evaluate them, or do our scouts not know how to evaluate defensive line? We do well in other positions. Also seems we aren't good at evaluating other defensive tackles on other teams as well. Brian, first to that first part, they absolutely evaluate all the interior defensive linemen. They don't just tell the scouts to ignore.
It's been a first-round grade. It's been a first-round grade on the defensive tackle.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times what you see is a de-emphasis from coaching staff or just general vision of what the defense is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that's why it is. But you got to remember, like you mentioned, they did spend a first-round pick on Mozzie Smith. Yeah. They did spend their top pick in the 19 draft on Tristan Hill. I mean, so they've used him on top 100 picks before. It just has not worked out in a lot of instances.
I mean, and Dan Quinn is part of this too. I mean, I could go all the way back to Rod Marinelli. if you tell Will McClay that, hey, I understand that you wanted, J.J. Watt, but the coaching staff didn't think he was a fit. T.J. Watt, I'm saying J.J. Watt. Yeah, he's doing TV now. But T.J. Watt, and all of a sudden you're sitting there, and Will would be quick to tell you, no, we all had a hand in this. We all had a hand in this. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. You all had a hand in it. Great. Just, die on that hill, and that's good. Good for him. Rod Marinelli's a damn good coach, and the way they went after defensive tackles was, it was surprising, because if you look at Rod Marinelli's defenses in Tampa Bay, it was Booker McFarland, it was Warren Sapp, it was guys, it was Simeon Rice, and I mean they had guys, they had first round players that were on that defensive line, so. To me, it didn't make a lot of sense. They didn't think as much of the position as others. If you remember Sharif Floyd, scouts, they had a 5th round grade on Sharif Floyd, and a top 5 grade on Sharif Floyd, and all of a sudden it's like, nah, we're going to pass on this. We'll bail, that kind of thing. So yes, has the position been has it been neglected by some regimes? I think so. Has it? Then the Dan Quinn regime comes in, and what do you Oso Digizua, you look at Quentin Bohanna, they look at Rogers
in a way.
Golston, Golston. I mean, you look, Golston. I mean, you look at defense, they just haven't hit on the right guys. They just have not. They plug and play those offensive linemen all day, but. You wonder, as an evaluator, there used to be a time, and Bobby, you're much closer to the scouts than me. I wonder, do they have a defensive tackle or defensive line evaluator? And it's all of them. It's not like I'm pointing the finger, which people out there probably are like, yeah, Broadus, you're pointing the finger. But if you're not evaluating that correctly, then I think what you have to do is, do we need to have a different evaluator? That's where if there's a position guy and a cross checker guy that handle defensive linemen, then I might, if we're struggling with the evaluation part of it, I would maybe consider shuffling guys around a little bit. And scouts are gonna watch this and they're gonna hate me. I'm not trying to be mean to you guys. I'm really not. I'm just saying, though, if I ran, and you're probably gonna say, well, thank God you don't run the department, Broadus, but that's fine.
I would never say that.
No,
I wouldn't say it.
But maybe they would, and I haven't done this since 2005. Maybe there's a reason for that. But if I knew that I was struggling in a position and I had position cross checkers and evaluators and all that, I would surely look at what we're doing. I would surely evaluate. And I'd look at myself too if I was running the department. Or like, hey, am I seeing this the right way?
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned, I think they've gotten evaluations on guys right. They just haven't necessarily been in a position to pick them all the time. Like you mentioned, they liked Sharif Floyd. They really liked Vita Vea a couple of years back, more than a couple now. Geez, time flies. But they liked Vita Vea. They liked Jeffrey Simmons. Like they've had guys that they would have picked if they would have been in position to get him. I think it's just they weren't necessarily in position to pick him. And so, yeah, the way it's fallen has not worked out for them to this point, specifically with the one techniques. I think Odigizua is a good player. I think Odigizua is he a perfect one? No. But as a 3rd round player, I think he's been, for the most part, I would consider that a successful pick to this point.
Yeah,
you feel like
I would too.
You feel like he could probably be more. But I still would consider that a successful pick. And so, but no, I think that's all. I think those are all good and legitimate things to take into consideration and things to look at there.
Again, I'm not trying to be mean or I just, know if I ran, if I was say I was the defensive line evaluator and we were on a bad run with some of these guys, I would expect to be replaced. I would expect to be, if I continue to evaluate the last 4, 5, 6 years, and we're not hitting that position, I would expect to be replaced in that area.
How does the weight work typically? So, Brian, we've talked about this before. By the time they get to the draft, Mozzie Smith probably had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, minimum 6 grades on him, I would guess, from people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is that typically, to your understanding, is that equal weight given to all 6 grades, or is somebody else's generally weighted heavier, or do they come in there with a general consensus? Maybe there's an outlier, and then when they pod and they kind of break things down, then they come to a consensus from that. But in that sense, could we be looking at a situation where the defensive line cross-checker maybe has had a different view and has gotten outweighed by some scouts, or in some instances the area scout?
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If I was having a bad run, or I would evaluate if I was the director of player personnel like Will McClay, I would do a deep dive study into why we struggle at certain positions. I would, and I would take an off season and I would say, okay, analytics folks, give me the last 10 years of my drafts, and let's look at the positions where we've had strengths, where we've had values of picks, where we've gotten the Blands of the world and, stuff like that, and kind of get an idea of, okay, how did we come to this selection? Because I can say, we'll see what happens with Mozzie Smith, but a top player on your board will probably have anywhere between 5 and 6 grades on him. You might, and that includes if they still get the coaches involved too. When I was with the team, coaches threw a report in there. You had the scout, the area scout. You had a cross checker. You had a national guy. You had the coach grade, and then you had the final grade that you put up on the board as a group.
And doesn't Will grade as well? Like, I think Will's
a defensive coach.
Yeah, and so Will will do grades as well. I think I don't know how many.
He doesn't go on the road. He doesn't go on the road like other general manager type guys, but he has to, and that's not his fault. He has to be around the office to handle the day-to-day operations of what happens.
And he still grinds tape and
he absolutely does
studies. And like I said, I don't know if he puts a grade on every player on their board. I don't know how that process works.
He has an idea on every player on that board.
He's got an idea on everybody, but I know he still grades players.
Yeah, he doesn't, there's a lot of general manager type guys or directors of player personnel that do go out and scout, but because the way the Cowboys are set up in their scouting department, with the general manager being Jerry and then Steven being director of player personnel, he has to be in the building for the day-to-day operations of stuff, be around the team. So
makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Next one from Thomas here. Thomas says, what position and/or person do we have the most legitimate shot at trading for, and what are the odds? Brian, I do think that they're going to look for a receiver. I think they will feel like they go out and make it. Now, I don't know if that receiver is going to be, is that going to be an Amari Cooper trade, or is it going to be more like I'm trying to think of a receiver they've added in recent years from a trade who was just.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to rain on your parade.
No, please do.
Is there too much history with Amari Cooper to trade for him?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. But you said a player like Amari Cooper.
You want to talk about honest moments? I'd love to. I'd love to get an honest question.
There you go.
To either one, Jerry or Mike. Mike too. Why is Amari Cooper not here anymore?
Yeah.
Why'd you take such low value for Amari Cooper?
Yeah.
And look, some of it may be warranted. Others of it, I think there are probably people on the roster, formerly or even currently, who thought, I don't necessarily like the way the Amari Cooper situation was handled. And I mean, that's something that, again, we talk about unified vision and getting everybody on board with a certain thing.
Yeah.
That can be tough at times. Now, if you look at a position, they clearly have tried to add people on the defensive line since August.
Yeah.
So if they find a value out there, Jonathan Hankins, I wouldn't be surprised if they made a deal like that. To just go get somebody like, hey, I need another body, somebody I'm familiar with, somebody who knows the schemes. Could do a little bit of that. they seem hell bent on this is their running back group. They have not.
There's another question you asked. You know, Nick Harris said today. Nick Harris, I asked him the question. Nick Harris goes, "Do you really feel good about this running back room?"
Yeah.
You know, do you really feel good about this running back room? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's one where, you know, I think that their actions say they are. They won't even give Dalvin Cook a shot. We keep asking Jerry every week, are you gonna even take a look at Dalvin Cook? And each week it's nope, don't think so. Don't think we're going that way. Let's finish up.
Can I ask as we're playing on the fly here?
Yeah.
The person, you know, asked about if Cook's banged up.
Yeah.
And my reply was he's fine.
Okay.
So
then I think we are talking about decline potentially, from some of the stuff that we've seen.
Yeah.
All right, let's finish up with a question here from Jeffrey. Jeffrey says, like you just said, you don't know that they're going to go out and make a big time move, somebody like that, with no major additions. What do you think is the realistic ceiling for this football team right now?
Wins,
or just in general,
9.
like 9. So you think 9 is the cap?
We did this, and I kept a sheet. I kept a sheet right here on the G-Bag Nation. We did a sheet. We played win-loss with the record.
Yep.
And this is, you know, we had a loss at Cleveland. Okay, we were wrong about that. Had a win against New Orleans. We were wrong about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had lost to Baltimore.
Nailed it.
We had a win against the Giants. We have loss at Pittsburgh, loss at Detroit, loss at San Francisco. That makes them 2-5. We win in Atlanta, win against Philadelphia, lost to Houston. That makes you 4-6. Win at Washington. Okay, now we might be crazy here because Washington looks like a legitimate football team, at least
they do
the way they're playing right now. So November 24th, we had a win at Washington. We had a win against the Giants on Thanksgiving. That made you 6-6. Lost Cincinnati, win at Carolina. That makes you 7-7. Win against Tampa Bay. That might be unrealistic now. We'll see how Tampa plays at the end of the year. We had a loss at Philadelphia, makes you 8-8, and then a win against Washington to make you 9-8. So think about that. Even if you split against, say, the Commanders, the way we have it, does that make you what, 8-9 right there? Yeah.
It's rough.
That's the sheet. Yeah, we did this before the season as a show, and I kept track of, you know, but there's some surprises there. You know, there's some surprises of the Commanders are clearly a surprise on this list. You know, what's going to happen? You know, Cincinnati. Well, usually when you play Cincinnati late in the year, they've kind of figured it out.
Yeah.
You know,
I think if you look at right now, I'd say they're about a 7-8 win team.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at ceiling, if you're telling me ceiling, meaning things fall into place.
Yeah.
You get the breaks that are reasonable. 10 wins probably is something you could do.
I had ceiling at 11. This is before after training camp.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking 9 and I was thinking ceiling was 11, floor was 8. That's what I was thinking.
I think when we're talking
there are a couple more injuries away from being
I think
in the top 10.
My projection is, and I've kind of talked about this or said I think it could be possible, but my feeling is I think we do get an in-season firing. I think things will get to a point where we get an in-season firing.
Do you think they'll quit on him? They'll quit on him and that's it?
Yep. I think that they're going to run into some struggles, and what we've seen at times from this locker room is they don't deal with adversity well.
Sure.
And 5
Start
years
pouting.
5 years of messaging can wear old on some guys, and 5 years are like, well, what exactly have you done? Like, I think it'll be really easy for people to start, pointing fingers if you are 2-5. And then, or maybe
that's kind of what we thought after
even after that, you go into Atlanta, 2-6, maybe.
Yeah, well, you got Philadelphia. After that, Philadelphia doesn't look like a very good team to me right now.
No, but that'll be the battle of the toxic cultures.
Yeah, lose to Pittsburgh, lose to Detroit, who's coming off a bye week. That's got you at 2-4, and then you got a bye, and then you go play at San Francisco. Really, maybe with the coach's job on the line, you lose that one. That's 2-5.
Very
I see what
very
you're doing
big
there.
primetime game. And
I don't. Hey, we're not trying to be doom and gloom dudes here. I'm not trying to be, but
realistic.
It's just be realistic. Yeah, you could be, or you can win. You can win all the games. You beat
and
Pittsburgh.
maybe they'll win this week against Pittsburgh. We're going to study Pittsburgh and find that out. That's what we're going to do. That. We'll have a couple more episodes for you.
We will.
That's us for us today on the Love the Star podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. A little bit different. We're kind of in purgatory zone of game is over and next game hasn't really started prep yet. So hope this was informative though on some broader principles that we were looking at. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. We will talk to you guys again later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.